We are alive because Jesus is alive with us. This week I was watching TV with my wife, and I don't know if you guys know this about us, but we are big fans of cooking shows. We like to watch all the old cooking shows. And we were watching a cooking show, and I'm just amazed at what they can make on these cooking shows. I could have all the best ingredients in the world, and you're still getting like macaroni and cheese. That's just where we're at. Or pasta. I can do pasta pretty well. But we're watching this TV, and there's this commercial that comes on, and it talks about this man. And it talks about how he didn't have friends in country clubs, and his parents didn't have a will, and he didn't have all these things. And it goes on, and it says that he didn't invest in the stock market, but he invested in people, and it was this great thing. And as the commercial ends, it's like, I don't even know what the company is for, but it's a commercial for Jesus. And it says, Jesus, he gets us. And it's this great commercial. And I was like, that's really cool. But it got me thinking this week, what does success look like? Because while we just saying this is not where we belong, while we believe that there is a home for us eternally in heaven, we got to spend some time down here. And if we're going to spend some time down here on earth, then we want to be successful, because the opposite of successful is not successful or failure, and nobody wants to be that. Right? No one wants to struggle those ways. And so we want to be successful, but what does it look like? I want you all to think for just a second, what does success look like to you? Because I found the way that you answer this question says a lot about you. So I'm not going to make you answer out loud. Just saying. But there's a couple of different kind of avenues that we have for success. Some metrics that we use. Because on one of the metrics, the most obvious side, is we have finances. If you want to be successful, you have to be making money. Right? You have to have made so much money. But it's ironic because we also believe and we also know that money doesn't buy happiness. Money might make it so that you don't live paycheck to paycheck, or you're not behind or in debt, because all that stress, all that stuff, that is not successful. That is a hardship, and we understand that. So we want to make some money. There's been studies, though, that after $150,000 a year, you do not get happier. And now some of you are thinking $150,000 a year, I'd be very happy with that. I'm with you. I understand. But some of us are like, that seems awfully low. Because if I had $150,000, then like if I had $200,000, I'd be a quarter happier, right? Like I'm going to be happier with that. Or if I had $1 million a year, I'm sure I'd be happy with that. But for whatever reason, after about $150,000, our return on investment for being successful and happy and enjoying our life goes down. More money, more problems, whatever the case may be, we start to get not successful anymore. Even though we have money, even though we're making good money, it's not success the way that we hoped it would be. It's interesting. Almost everyone who's ever won the lottery is bankrupt. You guys ever think about that? If money makes you successful, how come you can win $800 million and go bankrupt? That makes no sense to me. I will probably never see $1 million in my life. But 800 million? And you still go bankrupt? That's some poor investments, I'm just saying. So if it's not money, what makes us successful? How do you lead a successful life? Because on the other side of money, if money's in the left, then on the other side is investing in people. Right? You might not be financially rich. You might have bills that you can't pay, but you're loved in your sphere of influence. Your coworkers, your family, your friends, all the people that you know have respect and love for you, and you feel like you have a successful, happy life. You might not have all the money, but you have happiness. You feel successful. And it's interesting to me, this is what caught my attention this week, is that both are metrics for success, but they are vastly different from one another. In fact, they're opposite of one another. But what if there's another metric? What if we could measure success not by our money that we achieve, not by our feats, not by the way that we invest in people, but by our faith in God? What if, maybe just maybe, success looked like loving God, like following God with all that we had? What if there was a different path to success, and that if we did this, if we followed this other path, then all the other things would come? Money would come and go, friendships would come and go, the way we treat people would come. All of it would come if we just stayed on this path. You see, way back in the Old Testament, there was a guy named David. And David was a boy. He was a young man. He was a teenager. And David knew how to be successful. You see, David was just a kid doing his thing. He had a bunch of older brothers. I'm sure they picked on him. They were bigger than he was. You know, they joined the military. They did all these things. And David was the smallest of all his brothers. And yet somehow, David was able to lead a life of moral upstandingness most of the time. If you've read the Bible, you know it's not always. But most of the time, we all have bad days. He was able to do great things for God. And he goes on to become a king. He even goes on to be the only person in the Bible that is known as a man after God's own heart. The only other person who's closest is John, who self-describes himself as the disciple Jesus loved. But notice, John is the one who describes himself this way. Other people describe David as a man after God's own heart. And I wonder, as a shepherd, as a boy out in the field, cold, frigid nights, he's watching sheep, wishing that he had any other job in the world, or that he was one brother older so that the youngest could sit out there with him instead. I wonder what David thought. I wonder how David put it together for what success would look like in his life. And so this morning, I want to read out of Psalms. Psalm chapter 20 is this prayer that David puts up, and it's a blueprint for success. Because make no mistake, while Solomon ran the richest, most powerful country of Israel at the time, that is wealthier than anything that we will ever find today's standards, David set all the work. David did all the backbreaking work. He did all the foundations. He made all of it happen with God. And Solomon got to enjoy it and then ruin it. But David had this plan for success. And I want to look at that today, because I think that while we are here on earth, all of us want to be successful. And in order to be successful, we need a couple of things, right? And the first is that we need to be able to call out to God for strength. Psalm chapter 20, verse 1, it says this. It says, "May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you." It's interesting that David is the most powerful person on the planet at his time. And the first thing that he writes in the psalm is, "May God protect you." See, David, even though he's powerful as a person, he knows he needs more than what he can bring to the table. That at some point, we are not enough to get the job done. No matter how big we are, no matter how strong we are, no matter how big the muscles, no matter how much we work at it, no matter how much we're smart, any of those kind of things, at some point, we need help to get the job done. You know, it's funny, later on in the Bible, it says that God uses our weakness to make things perfect. That his will is brought to perfection through our weakness, not our strength. This week, as we started a new Bible study on Wednesday nights, we talked about how we need to be weak. That from that weakness, that understanding of that deep need for God, we grow. That we understand that you, me, plus God is a lot more than you and me by ourselves. Sorry, that was a math equation for all those of you guys who like math. When I was younger, I had this tradition. My family didn't have very many traditions, and so I had made my own tradition, and every 4th of July, or I guess 3rd of July, I would spend the night at my friend's house. Mostly because my family didn't do a whole lot of celebrating or anything like that, and so I would just spend the night at my friend's house, And we'd stay up all night and we'd play video games and all that such fun stuff because, we teenagers drinking a lot of Mountain Dew, playing all the video games, all that fun stuff. And then in the morning, we would watch the 4th of July Coney Island hot dog eating competition, which is both the coolest and grossest thing I've ever seen in my life, guys. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it is, anybody who can stick over 100 hot dogs in their mouth and swallow in under 2 minutes is just, wow. Competitive eating. But anyway, I digress. So we stayed up and we played video games all night, and then in the morning we watched the hot dog eating contest, and then while we were waiting, because there's a couple hours in between before it gets dark, that we were just kind of hanging out. And his dad had been making ribs, and his dad makes the best ribs. And we're waiting, and he's like, well, let's play video games again. I was like, yeah, of course. More Mountain Dew, more video games. This is what being a teenager is all about. I'm in. And so we go to play video games, and he can't find the game that we played. Literally, the game we played all night that should probably still be in the machine is just gone. And it's this weird moment because we spend the next 2.5 hours looking for this game in his room that is not very big, mind you. And we throw everything out. We're throwing everything around. We're digging around like anywhere it could possibly be. We check the kitchen because, you go back and forth for the drinks and the food and all that. Nothing in the kitchen. We're looking around, and all of a sudden, 2.5 hours later, we're like, it's not happening. We're about to go buy a new video game at this point because it just disappeared. I don't know if God took it to heaven or what, but it's gone, guys. And so we're looking around, and we're done, and we're just done looking. And so we go back to the kitchen, defeated, get more energy drinks, more Mountain Dew, and we're sitting there trying to figure out what we want to do. We don't have enough money to scrape together to buy a new video game, and he doesn't really want to ask his parents, and I don't want to ask his parents, and so I'm not asking my parents, that's for sure. And so we're trying to figure this out, and all of a sudden his mom comes in, and she says, what's going on, guys? And we explain the situation. We explain how we had misplaced this, and it really ruined our whole day. No kidding. She just reaches over on the counter and goes, this one? 2.5 hours we struggled for this. And I wonder how many times in our lives we try and do things on our own without calling out for God's help. I wonder how many times do we struggle and struggle and struggle because we say, I can do it. I can do it. It's going to be fine. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make the work done. It's going to be okay. I can do it. And we struggle, and eventually we ask for God's help. And I wonder how much time gets wasted while we're waiting and why we're struggling before we just go, why did we not ask for help in the beginning? Why did we not call out to God in the beginning? See, I found that in life, our biggest struggles, be them financial, be them family, be them whatever it is, when disaster strikes our way, we turn to one another, we don't turn to God. But if we want to be successful, if we want to be well off here in this world, we need to change that. We need to flip that. We need to start to rely on God first. The second thing that we see is that in order to be successful, we need to guard our actions. See, the prayer continues. And in verse 3 it says this, it says, may he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. See, I wonder about this because I don't know about you guys. I don't make animal sacrifices. We don't do that anymore. Jesus paid that price. We don't make animal sacrifices. But I wonder about the sacrifices we do make for God. See, a little bit later, we're going to be talking about some financial sacrifices and about how this month is going to be dedicated to giving. But before we get into that, I wonder about just physical sacrifices or time or these sacrifices that we give to God. Because there's often times that we say we make sacrifices, but are they really sacrifices? You see, even in the Bible, in the old times, throughout the Old Testament, there is a level to sacrifices. Not every sacrifice is the same. If you go all the way back to Genesis, Cain and Abel, their sacrifices are not the same. And God looks at their sacrifices different. It's what drives Cain to want to kill his brother out of jealousy. Because God looks at Abel's sacrifice and he loves it. And he looks at Cain's sacrifice and he goes, that's not a sacrifice. And so I wonder if God looks at our sacrifices sometimes and he says, that's not a sacrifice. I wonder if we set aside 5 minutes for God out of a 24-hour day, I wonder if God goes, oh, thank you so much for that 5 minutes. Or if we decide, well, maybe that's not a sacrifice because we spent 3 hours watching TV at night. Maybe we chose to go out with friends, or maybe we chose something above God. I don't know what all of our individual lives look like, but I know that there is a ranking to sacrifices. And if you're going to bring a sacrifice to God, if we are going to give a sacrifice to God, it better be a good one. So otherwise, your brother kills you. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is, if we're going to give a sacrifice to God, it should be a good one. Because what good is giving something to God that is not a sacrifice? You see, in the Old Testament, after this psalm, David is king and he's doing all these things and he's building this temple, and somebody wants to donate the wood. They want to be a part of what's going on. And David has this verse, and he answers with this statement. He says, I will not give a sacrifice to the Lord that costs me nothing. See, it was David's job to secure all this stuff and get everything ready. He wanted to build the temple, and God told him no, but David wanted to set it all right so that it was easy to build, because he wanted no reason that it wasn't built by Solomon or whoever came next. And when he's getting it all ready, he wants it to be his sacrifice to God. After a lifetime of following God, after all that God has done for him, he wants to do something for God. He says, I will not give a sacrifice that costs me nothing. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, we've gotten in the habit of giving sacrifices that don't cost us. The third thing that David says for success is that we need to align our hearts with God's heart. In verse 4, it says, may he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all of your plans. It's interesting that when we align our hearts to God's heart, powerful things happen. That's when God moves. See, David he's securing the temple, he's clearing out the promised land, he's doing all of these things that God has asked him to do, and he is blessed because of them. But then when we do things that are outside of what God has designed, outside of God's heart and his path for us, then things get a little off the rails. See, I wonder, traffic's not quite as bad here in Arizona as it is in California, but I wonder, have you ever prayed for less traffic on the road? I have. Have you ever prayed for a green light instead of a red light? Maybe you're running behind, made some poor decisions in the morning, didn't want to get up. It happens. But I wonder, do we really believe that those are prayers that God answers? Do we really think, I mean, obviously God could, but do we really think he would? Are those part of God's heart? Does God's heart say, I'm going to help you because you made some poor decisions earlier, get where you want to go at the expense of others? I mean, because that's really what we're asking. We don't like to phrase it that way. We're like, look, I don't care if everybody else needs to get to work too. I got to be there, guys. Like, you don't understand. My boss is different, and he's going to be upset, or whatever the case may be. When I was younger and I was in school, I used to do the same thing with tests. See, I don't know if you guys have been there, but I would probably play video games and hang out with my friends, or whatever the case may be. Maybe we were playing basketball. Either way, I would not study for important tests. I used to tell myself pressure makes diamonds, and so that was just kind of my thought process. And Scientifically, it's true. Test-wise, it's not as true. But I wouldn't study, and then I would get the test, and I'd be sitting in the chair the next day, and I'm ready. I'm not ready, but I'm going to take this test anyway, and I shoot up a quick prayer that just says, God, help me pass this test. Or maybe it's even the rational prayer where it's, God, help me pass this test, and next time I'm going to do better. I'm going to spend more time with you. I'll pray more. I'll study next time. Just help me pass this one. Get me through this moment, and then we'll make things better afterwards. But I wonder, is that really in God's heart? I mean, God loves us. He loves his people. But at the same time, how often do we throw up quick prayers because of poor decisions without trying to align our heart to God's heart? Because I'll be honest, I don't know if it's just me, but every test that I've prayed for without studying, I have failed. I've probably done worse than if I didn't pray. Just saying. However, there have been other times in my life where I've prayed for things that are very much in God's heart. For others, for hardships with others, for healing of broken bones, for healing of spirits and healing of families, and all of these things. And I've seen these miracles come true. See, seeing these miracles is why we think, well, if God can heal this person's broken bones, he definitely can help me pass a test. Right? It's why we start to kind of deviate. But the difference is, one glorifies God and one glorifies us. See, even back to the traffic, when we're trying to get through traffic quickly, it's for us. It's not for God. It's not for people. It's not to glorify God's name. We might tell God that we'll praise him more if he gets us through traffic, but it's not really to praise him. It's just for us. It's convenient for us. And so if we want to be successful, then we need to start aligning our heart to be in sync with God's heart. See, as we move through this life, we need to have eyes like God had eyes. A little forward into the New Testament, Paul goes on a missionary journey with a guy named Barnabas. And before, on their first journey, Paul and Barnabas, they go together, and what's interesting is this guy Barnabas, his real name is Joseph, but he's been given this nickname Barnabas, which sounds kind of out of this world and a little different than what we're used to, but it means son of encouragement. You see, this guy saw the world the way God saw the world. He saw people not for their faults, not for their shortcomings, not even as they were, but for what they could be, and he encouraged it into people. The same way Jesus did. He saw people with all of their shortcomings, all of their failures and flaws, and he said, you know what? We can be more than that. And he encouraged it until people got there. As they continue this journey, there's another person, John Mark, who leaves Paul and Barnabas. And when they go to set out on their second journey, Barnabas stays behind because he wants to pour back into Mark. Because he knows that there's still good that can be done there. He knows that God still has plans for this man. And Paul, despite all of his other things, says, no, I can't do it. And so he goes off on his own. But what's unique is that in some of his last letters, Paul recognizes Mark as a person of favor in the church, as a helper of God's kingdom. And he recognizes that Barnabas is poured back into this man, and now he's doing great things because Barnabas had a heart that aligned with God's. He didn't worry about what he could gain. He didn't worry about the hardships or any of these other things. He said, this is what God wants, and so this is what we're going to do. And I wonder if all of us strove for that, man, how different would our city look? How different would our state look if we strove to align our hearts with God's heart? The last thing that we see for David's plan for success is that if we want to be successful, we need to trust God and not ourselves. In verse 7, it says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. At this time, everybody believed in their military might. Chariots and horses were the cavalry of their day, right? And they were this great thing. And really, this verse is actually even referring to Egypt, who were known for their horses and their chariots. They outnumbered the ancient world when it came to warriors on horses and chariots. He says, some trust in these things, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. And what's interesting is this prayer that David is putting up, this psalm that he once sung so that the world will remember what's going on. This verse here is a reminder of God leading his people out of Egypt. Because Egypt, they trusted in their military might. They chased after the Israelites, after the Hebrews. But the Hebrews trusted God, and they trusted Moses. And God drowned the chariots, the horses. He wiped them out in a crashing of the parting of the Red Sea when it came back down. And he showed them that military might only get you so far. He showed them that despite all of the other things that we like to believe in here on earth, our muscles, our strength, or whatever we can do, our security, locks, whatever you want to call it, we believe in these things, but really we need to trust God and not what we can bring to the table. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Star Wars movie, I think it's called Rogue One. There's this little monk guy, and he's blind, and he's just kind of doing his thing in life, and he's not part of the Force, if you will, that Star Wars is made up of, but he has this saying, and he says, I am one with the Force is with me, right? And he says this to himself. He repeats this, I am one with the Force is with me. I am one with the Force is with me. And he goes through life with this saying, and he trusts this entirely. To the point where there is gunfire all around, and there's this crazy stuff, and he's just walking, just straight through. Totally blind, has no idea where he's going, he just trusts, and I am one with the Force is with me, I am one with the Force. And he walks through the thing, and it's this very powerful moment. And I know, movies, cinema, it's designed to be powerful. But I wonder, what would happen if we truly believed that with God? If we said, I am one with God, and God is with me. We sing about it. We know that it's true. That each and every one of us that is called upon God, we have the Holy Spirit within us. We are one with God, and God is with us. That is 100% true, but somehow we don't translate it to every aspect of our life. See, what if we went to work and we're dealing with that angry coworker and we say, I am one with God, God is with me, and we treat them differently? What if maybe, just maybe, that has a profound impact on their life? Or maybe it's at home. Maybe after a long day of work, long hours dealing with those coworkers that we don't like to deal with, we come home and we take it out on our family. Maybe our short temper finally comes to a head and it's just a rough night. But really we should be saying, I am one with God, God is with me. Right? I am one with God, God is with me. And we have this idea of, I'm going to treat my family better tonight. Today I'm frustrated, I need a moment. And maybe we just say that. Maybe we say, hey, just give me a moment, let me collect myself, and then we're good. Or maybe it's with our family or our friends. And we need patience. We need God's help through that. Or maybe, just maybe, it's with our finances. See, finances are one of the hardest things that we give to God. We wrestle time and time again. But I wonder what would happen if we trusted God and not ourselves with our finances. What if we truly believed we were stewards of this money that God had given us? Would we spend it the same? Would we make a difference? See, this month, for the month of October, today is October 1st, and for the month of October, we are going to launch what is known as our month of giving. And I'm actually going to have Red come on up and explain this a little bit. So if you would like to come on up, sir. I would love to.